Welcome to Pat O'Keefe's World of Curiosities. And my favorite thing that we do twice a month is with Zeea and Pat's Witchy Wisdom. Zeea, what do we have tonight?
Hey everybody, thank you for watching. Um, so we're going to be talking about another one of me and Pat's favorite subjects, and that's fairies. And what better time to talk about fairies when it's midsummer right now today, and I'm outside because it's very hot in my house. But you know, fairies is such a fascinating subject. Like when people hear the word fairy, I think that a lot of the time people think about, Tinkerbell kind of fairies, like from Peter Pan. Let me show you my earrings. I wear my little fairy earrings. Can you see like a dancing fairy there? So people think probably little winged creatures that fly around. And I've always believed in fairies. I've never seen one myself, but like when people hear that word fairy, they usually think of the little flying ones. But there are all different types of fae folk. There's different names for them. The good neighbors, fae folk, the little people. There's all different names. So whenever we talk about the fairy folk, it's encompassing, you know, uh, gnomes, elves, trolls, brownies, and so on. There's so many things, and they're not all just small. They can be human sized as well, but have different special powers and abilities. And it's in all different folklore all around the world. So, what do you make of that, Pat?
I agree, Zia. And one of my favorite tales is The Will of the Wisps. And these are types of fae that is seen really in any body of water, but they're also seen over like earth, right? And they show themselves as these beautiful orbs, and they love the the ponds and the still waters. So they love lakes and ponds. You'll often see them over those types of bodies of water. And they say that some believe that these are only lights, that they appear as lights, but there are others that feel that they have bodies, just like any other fae has a body, and that they're not simply energy. So will o' the wisps are one of my favorites, and probably and I love all Fae. I will tell you, I have a passion for the Fae. We have a fairy tree in the front that is a very big deal for my granddaughter and I, and we hang all of these shiny things on it because, as we know, the Fae love shiny things. And so the brownies are one of the Fae that I love because I really respect hardworking people. And why wouldn't I respect a hardworking Fae? So the brownies are really particular and they get as far as which families they connect to. And the families that they really love to connect to are hardworking families. I mean, in their mind, they want to help those who are also hardworking. And so they will do things around the house, but they expect you also to keep the house clean. It's like a partnership. And they can get so close to a family that if they leave, and if the house begins to deteriorate, if they say attach to the house that the family lived in instead of leaving with the family, they can kind of go mad. And there are, hauntings, if you will, because they do kind of haunt the house that they were attached to with that family when they were happy. And a good brownie can become something we call a bogart. And a bogart is a very unhappy brownie. And like I said, that's one of the scenarios where a brownie can become kind of malevolent, and seek out maybe revenge if they feel like they have been hurt in some way, or if they have been um, disrespected in some way, they can become kind of angry, angry little people. But there are little brownies who are just born mischievous. They're kind of like the bad boys of the brownie bunch, and they become of what we call again bogarts, and they can do tricks on humans. But overall, brownies are just really warm. They love their family. They get very, very close with the animals of the family. So, they often, if you watch your pet, often we say, well, it's a ghost that the pet is tracking, right? If there's nothing in front of it. But it very well could be a brownie or another member of the Fae nations that they are connecting to. But there are all kinds. I mean, we have nymphs, which are known in Greece. And I think also they are considered very beautiful. They interact with humans. In fact, they have been known to marry humans. And of course, in literature, they have been shown to be kind of hypersexual. Now, the Kelpie is one that is kind of frightening because they are known for being, well, they can be cannibals, with their own kind, but especially with others like humans. So they can be threatening. And so that's another type of fae. Most fae, though, are not seen like that. Like you said, most of the time we think of pixies, which are the little 4-inch, fairies, and they're known for riding on the backs of birds, or maybe even on the back of a frog. So those are the ones that we most often think about, and the ones which, people like our modern culture has glommed onto, so that you see that more often than any other type, if you will, of fae. So, and I'll just mention one more because there are many. And one is the Irish sea water guardians. Now, they are only a few inches tall. And again, they can be seen as light over water. Now, these are very special little guys, though, because they love storms. They absolutely love storms. They love to surf the waves as they're, going up and down. You might see these glowing little fae on top of the water. And they can also be friends with dolphins and other intelligent type of creatures. So if you are needing help and you are in an Irish body of water, especially, you would call upon these particular fae to help you. What about you, Zia? Do you have any of them that are your favorites?
I like all of them because I just think they're so fascinating. It's funny you were talking about brownies, so that's kind of like some people would say like a house elf, and those are known for helping like do household chores and like repair your shoes and stuff like that. But I've heard some, legends say don't thank them or they'll leave kind of thing. That's kind of like in Harry Potter, the house elves. If you gave them a piece of clothing, they would be free and left, but really it's not like they're under your servitude. They're just kind of living with you. But I thought one time that I had a brownie living in my wall because I really did. This was recently, and there was a hole that had been, I can't even remember, it was so long ago why there was a hole in the wall. But we always like had a mirror to hide it on the wall. But then we moved that mirror, and then I just didn't patch that hole up. But anyways, I've seen like a little blue light in there glowing at night, just so faintly though. And I'm like, what is that? But then I finally figured out that it was just some kind of light reflection from the mirror. But for a while I was thinking that would be so cool, and I would wake up a certain time of night too. And then that's when I noticed it, like 3 a.m. But there's all kinds of, there's fairies that's attached to different flowers, and that's, the flower they have their energies attached to, and they take care of them. And there's some people say you shouldn't interact with them at all, and then some people say, well, you can bring them offerings, and one of the common offerings is milk or maybe just sweet things like honey or candy. And like you said, they like shiny things. However, do not give any kind of iron. All of the Fae, definitely in the Irish tradition, in their stories, they say that iron repels them and that they, cannot touch iron. And but the Fae, the fairies that live around this area, they're known as the, well, I mean, in Cherokee legend, they're known as the little people, okay? And they look like the Cherokee, and they're small in stature and have very long hair down to their ankles. And they do have magical powers, and they their offering that you would give them, and most of any of the nature land spirits around here, is tobacco or rabbit tobacco, which is also known as life everlasting. And they can help you. They can help perform magic for you and make things come out in your favor. But it is tricky. It's always tricky dealing with them. But in the Little People legends, if you and also this correlates with the Irish legends, is if you eat, or the Celtic legends, if you eat any of their food, that you will, go to their world and never come back to this world. And there's stuff like don't step in uh, mushroom rings and things like that. And so also there's this, we were talking, or I was talking about Peter Pan in the beginning when I introduced this. Um, there's a Cherokee legend about Forever Boy. Basically, this boy didn't want to grow up, and his father told him it was time to grow up and go with his uncle to learn how to be a man, but he didn't want to, so he went away with the little people, and they said that they would pray to Creator to give his parents a vision so that they would know what happened to him. And so he just lived with them and never grew old. Um, Also, there's the legend of the Tuatha De Danann, I hope I'm saying that right, of Celtic lore. And you might have something to say on that later as well. But they were like, they looked like normal people, usually, maybe with a little bit of different features, but, of normal size. And they were known to have lived in under the ground, they say. And still, and over in Ireland today, they've got those fairy mounds where people aren't allowed to go there and mess with them. They do not build roads through them. They leave them alone. They respect them still, and I think that's really cool. Um, but these entities were kind of like gods, like in the pagan tradition. Um, But the interesting thing is that here in Appalachia, like with the Cherokee legends, they have the Nanihi. I hope I'm saying that right too. But they are spirit, basically spirit people that the Cherokee observed like disappearing when they would go near water. Like they thought that they were normal like them, would be dancing and partying with them, but then they would go off, and then all of a sudden when they went to that creek, they would disappear. So it was believed that they lived under the ground, and that was like kind of the highway to get to that. And a lot of like magical fairy legends you'll hear like around water, and wells and springs is where you will encounter these beings, and especially in the liminal spaces too, like just before dawn, between night and day and night. Like right now, it's getting dark out, so there might be some fairies coming up. I just gotta keep my eye out. Um, but I do want to say this as well about the Nanihi, since I brought them up. Um, so I've told this story before on one of our shows, but right here next to my house, my grandparents had my papa had bulldozed some land, and they found like burnt charcoal in the ground and clay pots and stuff like that. And then that night everyone in bed heard like drumming and chanting, and and it was kind of like a vibrational thing, like you could hear it and feel it, and then it just went away. But everyone that was in the house that night can, you know, say that it happened for real, and they thought, maybe that's the spirit of the natives that had lived here previously, and maybe they, you know, uh, scared up the spirits, or woke them up. But the Cherokee would talk about how, like, they would hear drumming and it wasn't any of them or other nearby tribes. And when they would try to follow the drumming or where the smoke was coming from, it would move direction and they could never, like, find out where it was coming from. So that's the, like, kind of the Nihi people that lived under the ground.
All right. And then, we do have these tales from different cultures, and this is definitely rooted firmly in Appalachia because our forebears, our Scotch Irish, our English, our Welsh, our Germans, and all of the other cultures, the French, all of them brought with them these elemental forces because the question is, what are these? And most people believe, and I'm not going to say all, but most people believe that they are elemental energies, energies that become attached to the earth in some way. Even our brownies will often stay with a location rather than leave with a family, no matter how much they love that family. But there are so many more. I mean, you know, different species, if you will, like the dryads. The dryads are attached to a single tree and they love that tree. They will do anything that they can do to keep that tree alive. And they tend to be very friendly towards humans. And so it's often recommended that if you are new to any form of fake communication, take your shoes off, place them on the ground, put your hands on the tree, and try to communicate with the spirit of that tree. And note, I did say put your bare feet on the ground. That's because they communicate through the root systems, through the ground. And so that is how you'll be able to make that connection. And then, of course, we've got the gnomes. And, I know, right? And everybody knows the gnomes. But for those that don't, here are our little gnomes right there, our little caricatures of them. And they all have the little peaked hats, and, they're hardworking. They're seen often as little dwarves, and they mature quickly, all right? So they go from being children to adults in a very, very short period of time. And of course, they are connected to nature. In fact, many of our beautiful Fae peoples are connected to the earth, to nature. And so you find that you have species that really prefer rural areas like the gnomes and the brownies. And then, of course, we have, the kobolds. Now, kobolds, the only reason I'm mentioning this is because there's very little known about them, but they are in the deep mines with miners. And it has been said that miners have heard tapping in the walls before a cave-in as a warning for them to leave the area. And so they listen for that. Well, one of the things we can talk about is, you mentioned the fairy rings. And fairy rings are really interesting because if you've never seen one, they're quite striking because you walk outside and there's this sometimes huge ring of mushrooms. And I've seen some beautiful illustrations of fairies, and they show them dancing around, which supposedly causes the fairy rings, right? But that it is also a place that they might meet for counsel and sit upon each one of them upon a mushroom top.
Yeah. Um, and there's also the trooping fairies that are known to go the same route every year. Like, I actually had a friend tell me that this lady they knew said that there was every year during a certain time, I don't know if it was midsummer, but she would see these little lights go through her backyard, and it was always like certain time of year, every same little path. There's a path up here where I can see from where I'm at, and it's like this little green grassy patch, and it must be because there's water there under the ground or something, but I like to think that's a fairy path. That's where they walk through there. But yeah, I've always believed in fairies. I never stopped believing. Um, don't stop believing.
You
Yeah.
know, it's really interesting. Zia, my very good friend, Marty Workman, you know, rest in peace, she told me once when we were children, just children, that she had seen the fairy or the fae, and she had sworn to it. And, you know, that kid type of, you know, soul level swearing, and that she'd seen them at a creek, and that she'd come along and she started hearing music like this beautiful like harp and you know the Irish whistle and you know the Irish flute rather, and was hearing this music, and the closer she got it was like she was energized. It was like her feet almost began to tap themselves, and she saw them, and she said, Pat, she said they were dancing, and they must have been pixies because they had wings and they were small, and they were in the air and all around her. And that was the most magical moment of her life. And that woman, until the day she died, swore to this. And I truly, truly believe, based on hers and incalculable incalculable other reports of, you know, interactions with the Fae. I believed her 100%, and to this day, I know that that was her experience.
Yep. And, people have seen these things all over the world, and there's different names for them. There's the Puckwudgies up in the, I guess, New England area. And then you got people call them also duendes. It just matters what part of the world you're from, what they're called. But, there's another world out there. There's a spirit world or worlds out there that we may never truly understand or experience. But there are, if you go into a fairy ring, there's always like a time slip, you always lose time, or maybe you don't ever come back.
That is a possibility. And as you said, you know, if you end up in fairyland, never, ever, ever eat, because if you do, you can never return to the land of the humans. You are forever going to be there. And there are two courts, two ruling courts, if you will. They are called, and I know I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, but the Silly and the Onsilly courts.
Yeah.
And on silly simply means on blessed. So the silly is the opposite. And the silly court, those occupants are really like royalty. They love beautiful things and lovely things around them, right? And they just love to be in a beautiful scenery, and they will talk, you know, and give their guidance and advice, but they also judge, but they judge in a way that is very, very fair. Now, the on silly court is made up of, well, they're made up of every type, just like the silly court is of Fae. So all of the nations are going to be represented, but here's the difference. This is where the lower level types of Fae energy come into play. So never ever try to do deals with the silly court. Like usually you can ask, if I give onto you a silver coin, I would like to have good weather today. You see what I'm saying? You can do that exchange if you are one of those people that has that type of energy that can connect with the Fae peoples. But for the silly court, you cannot appease them. There's always going to be one that is angry with you for some reason. It's said that some witches will do for dark magic, do deals with the silly court, but it's something that I would not recommend. This is really, really negative energy, It's full of bogarts and low-level energies, and they actually travel, and this is so interesting, on the wind. So if you're ever in a wooded area and you hear many voices, and those voices are getting closer and closer to you, my recommendation is to leave the area because this may be the unseen court that is coming your way. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you want to add before we wrap this up tonight? Our edition on the Fae.
Well, when you talked about the unseelie court, I think of Queen Mab. I think is that isn't that part of that? She's a, yeah, she's the evil fairy queen. But then when you're talking about kind of the more, yeah, evil types of fairies, changelings come to mind. And there was stories about um, the fairies coming and trading one of their babies for a human baby. And that was a real common thing and story back in old times in Ireland.
Hmm. And one of the reasons that they might do that is because their baby is sickly. And so they want a healthy baby, so they leave their sickly baby. Now, what's interesting about these children is supposedly as they grew up, they remained sickly, but they were always very, very creative beyond the usual scope of, say, an artist. Because they had that connection to the fairy world. Another reason they might, exchange children is because they need the skill set that child naturally has, and so they bring that child into the fairy world, and they will leave a child in, one of their children in place of that child. And it could be you have just irked the fae. Keep in mind, they are not to be trifled with. They really aren't. They aren't all the sweet and pleasant, beautiful, light beings that we have grown up to think of. Thank you, Disney. They are different personalities and different nations. But I would like to close with just respect, respect for these. You can find them anywhere. You can find them in logs and stumps. They have their little tree houses in the trees. You can find them, around mushrooms, hills, valleys. They love waterfalls. They can be found everywhere, anywhere on earth.
Absolutely. And, we could probably make even a whole other episode, but yeah, thank you everybody for watching this. Be sure to like and subscribe, follow, all that good stuff, share.
Yeah, we'd love to have you as friends and follow us every week. And, we appreciate you all, just like Zia said, for being with us, because without you all, it's a very lonely place. And until next time, stay
Stay curious.
curious. Bye, everybody.